I'm trying to murder them.
So the bury your gays trope is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's when instead of getting a happy ending, LGBTQ characters face a premature and often gruesome death. We've seen this with Buffy the Vampire Slayer with Tara, in Orange is the New Black with Pusey, in The 100 with Lexa, and unfortunately far too many more shows for me to name them all. Episodes 3 and 7 of The Last of Us both focus on two different queer relationships, and both episodes end with queer characters dying. So on the surface, it might look like these episodes fall under the bury your gays trope, but today I'm going to talk about why they actually don't, despite their very sad endings, and why they're actually some of the best queer representation, in my opinion, that I've seen on television. Simply because I love this show, and I want to talk about it.
Paying attention to things. It's how we show love.
So I actually haven't played the game yet, but it's my understanding that we don't know very much about Bill and Frank's relationship in the game. Their relationship is very much implied, with a line about Bill calling Frank his partner, and then of course we have the infamous men's magazine that Ellie picks up.
I'm sure your friend will be missing this tonight.
In the show, we get this absolutely beautiful depiction of a romance that spans over the course of like over a decade and a half, that quite honestly could stand on its own as a short film, in my opinion. It was just that good of an episode. As the fandom loves to point out, same-sex marriage was not legalized in Massachusetts until 2004, which just puts that much more weight on the significance of Bill and Frank's marriage scene on their last day together. In the TV show timeline, Bill and Frank barely got to see a society that was starting to accept them. It is extremely likely that both of them were living in the closet prior to the outbreak in 2003. And then after the outbreak, they have this very beautiful, caring, mutually supportive, domestic relationship in which they both help each other grow, and they grow old together, and they die together. It's so powerful to me that Bill and Frank were given this intense and powerful love story, not in spite of the circumstances that they were in, but because of the circumstances they were in. They lived in this world that was not very accepting and quite possibly could have been awful to them because of who they were. And then when that awful world ends, their life begins.
I used to hate the world, and I was happy when everyone died. But I was wrong, because there was one person worth saving.
And then when they do die, their death is so respectful. Like Bill himself says,
"This isn't the tragic suicide at the end of the play. I'm old. I'm satisfied."
It is sad, don't get me wrong, but it's not really a tragedy. It's not Oberyn Martell getting his eyes gouged out. It's not Tara getting brutally shot right after she and Willow rekindled their romance. It is a peaceful and welcome death at the end of a happy life. And most importantly, we don't actually see it. At the end of the episode, we watch Joel and Ellie drive off through Bill and Frank's bedroom window, and the shot gets wider and wider, but we never actually see Bill and Frank's bodies. Their final moment is this private and this sacred thing for just them. We got this window into their life, and only into their life. Even though it ends in death, their story is not the death. Their story is the life. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we have Ellie and Riley in episode 7, Left Behind. They don't get to live a life out together. Their romance is just beginning the moment that it's cut short. But even though it's really tragic,
They could just be poetic and shit and lose our minds together.
I loved the depiction of their relationship. I really was not expecting this episode to resonate with me in the way that it did. I knew it was coming, and I was just like okay, they're kids, I don't really care. I watch Stranger Things and I love Stranger Things, but the romantic relationships between like Mike and Eleven and Max and Lucas don't really do much for me beyond like, oh, that's cute. What I didn't consider is that I already watched lots of young people in straight relationships on like Disney Channel and stuff like that when I was that age, but I never had a sapphic relationship of my own age, or really at all, to watch when I was that age. I didn't even fully understand that liking girls was an option when I was 14. So I'm sitting here watching Ellie and Riley run around the mall and being absolutely adorable together. I'm not just watching it as my 24-year-old self, I'm watching it for the 14-year-old who didn't have this to watch when she was 14. And I keep using the word beautiful, but it really was beautiful to watch. Riley's care for planning this special event for Ellie was so soft, and it had me just like the biggest smile and just full of excitement watching the two of them together, even though I knew it wasn't going to end happily. Bella Ramsey just absolutely nailed the acting in this episode. Just every little moment of like gay panic and pining and literally everything up until the tragedy was just, it was so cute and it was full of just the right amount of angst. Even though they're in this otherworldly post-apocalyptic scenario, their story is actually it's so like relatable and universal. The mall date is just this stereotypical teenager date. They're teenagers, and given the opportunity, it's highly unlikely that they would have just like stayed together forever and lived happily ever after. Like, that's just not how teenage relationships tend to work. And the experience of watching that relationship play out was stolen from both of them, but at the same time, this evening at the mall feels like a stolen bit of happiness. Like, this is not a world in which kids get to go on dates at malls. For just a moment, Ellie gets to be a normal teenager who's just blushing and laughing and being silly and gets to kiss the girl. Another recurring element of the bury your gays trope is that the deaths are often either meaningless or reduced to shock value, or overall just don't do the characters justice. Like back to Buffy, Joss Whedon elected to have Amber Benson in the opening credits in the same episode that he killed off her character Tara, just for the added shock value. While you could argue that Tara's death ultimately led to the Dark Willow story arc and therefore wasn't meaningless, Dark Willow was foreshadowed way before Tara was ever introduced, and I think that story arc could have been brought about without killing one half of the first long-time lesbian relationship on network television. Meanwhile, Riley's death sits at the core of this entire story. Without both Ellie and Riley getting bitten, Ellie would not have learned that she is immune and would not ultimately go on the journey that is The Last of Us. The loss of Riley is so integral to her character that it's almost shocking to me that it's from a piece of DLC and not just automatically part of the game. Suffering that intense loss is what makes her such a great counterpart to Joel, who has also suffered really intense loss and is also really closed off, and then they come together and become a found family. Lastly, these characters are not treated more brutally than their presumably heterosexual counterparts. We don't know much or anything about Sarah's mom, but given that Joel is a single father, I think it's safe to assume that their relationship ended poorly. Even his relationship with Tess, which was really not expanded on beyond a couple of lines and the scene of her spooning him like the baby girl that he is. It came to a very sudden and tragic end. This isn't a show where the straight characters are getting some happy, idealistic relationship, and meanwhile the queer relationships are ending in death. This is a world where everyone is suffering. No one's having a good time. And that's part of what makes these little glimpses of just queer happiness in this world so intensely special, which is ultimately why I'm okay with the fact that these characters died. I would love to hear your thoughts on these two relationships. I love this show so much. It is all I want to talk about right now. If you also just want to talk about any really painful examples of the bury your gaze trope that hit you hard, go ahead. This is a safe space. But thank you so much for hanging out with me, listening to my ramblings. This was a little more serious than usual because it's a serious show. But I love you guys, and hopefully I will see you in my next video. Bye!